Well, banks were set to reopen tomorrow. Not clear that they are going to reopen now because, as David was just mentioning there, the Bank of Cyprus has also been affected. That's the country's largest bank, and we've just learned that it will be closed until further notice. So that is a surprise, and I think will come to us as a surprise to many depositors at that bank. Not a very clear situation either at Cyprus Popular Bank, the country's second largest bank. It's being wound down. So to what extent it's actually functioning tomorrow and prepared to receive banking customers is a very open question. It's a matter of serious importance here because the banks, as you just mentioned, have been closed now for 10 days. And people really have not had much of access at all to their money. Just late yesterday, the government here put a limit on withdrawals from cash machines at 100 euros. That's the most anyone in this country can withdraw from their bank through cash machines while the branches remain shut. So, people will be looking forward to the banks reopening tomorrow. They're hoping that the banks are going to reopen tomorrow. But even when they do, Mark, it has to be pointed out that, it's impossible to imagine some mass bank run here because there are already going to be capital controls in place. So things like cashing checks, things like how much money we'll be able to get out of the bank when the bank does reopen. These are still open questions. There will be capital controls in place to make sure that people don't try and run into the banks and grab the 68 billion euros that are thought to be there on deposit. Mark?
Ryan, what about uninsured depositors? Because, yes, those having deposits under 100,000 will be spared, but those with deposits over 100,000 euro won't be spared. Some will essentially be wiped out, particularly in Cyprus Popular Bank. What's the reaction to that part of the deal?
Well, no reaction yet, but as you can imagine, the reaction will not be a positive one because if people, as of Friday, that had money at Cyprus Popular Bank knew that they were going to be mostly wiped out, it's a bit of a surprise when it comes to the country's largest bank, the Bank of Cyprus. Even if EU officials say they will only lose about 40% of their deposits, that's still a huge hit to depositors at that bank, and it is the Bank of Cyprus that is thought to have most of the Russian depositors at it as opposed to the Cyprus Popular Bank. Look, at stake here is the entire banking system. Out of the 68 billion euros that we know was on deposit in this country at the end of January, more than half of it was accounts over 100,000 euros. The big question now is how much of that money is going to remain in the country. Sure, they got capital controls, but how long can those last? Clearly, money's going to want to leave the country. What's that going to do for the banking sector, and what's that going to do for the economy? The economy was already set to contract this year by 3.5%. If you have, mass departure of international capital, well, it might be a much, much uglier situation than just a contraction of 3.5%. Mark?